Hello and welcome to the Prepared and More YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that is extremely important in preparedness. However, it fails to get on most people's radar, and here's why. We're going to be talking about sewage, or what happens to the water that comes out of your home, your toilets, your sinks, your showers, those types of things. Most people don't consider it in their preps. They consider fresh water, they consider food, they consider prepping a whole variety of other things, but they don't think much about sewage because in our normal everyday life, it's just always there. It always works for the most part. Aside from a few minor plumbing issues, it works. Even in my case, when I got started into prepping was back in 2007, 2008 when we had a major ice storm roll through Missouri, and for that ice storm we were without power 2 weeks. But everybody's sewers continued to work, so they don't think about it. It's one of these things, well, it always just works. The problem is it always works until it doesn't work. And in a true SHTF type situation, we're going to explain today why your sewer system probably won't work and how it may be the worst situation that you haven't prepared for. So let's first talk about the two basic types of sewer systems or septic systems that you might have at your house. First, if you have a more rural location, you may have an actual septic system that may have lateral lines, it may have a lagoon. There's several different configurations that you may have, but it is basically your own private sewer system, typically called a septic system. That's actually the best case scenario for most preppers. So if you're rural and you have one of these septic systems, that's excellent. Most likely that will continue to work after it all hits the fan and you won't have to worry about it. There's a couple of caveats to that though we want to talk about. So if you've got a septic system at your house, first of all you want to make sure that your septic system doesn't require electricity to work. There are some systems, and I've lived in a home that have one of these, that as part of the system somewhere there's some kind of a pump that pumps the sewage or macerates, sometimes that's chops it up, that pumps the sewage or chops it up. If you have one of those pumps that's required as part of your system, you need to know that, and you also need to have a backup for the electricity to that. Otherwise, your whole septic system will not work properly. Okay? And you're going to quickly find that to be a problem. So first of all, if you have a septic system, verify that it does or does not require electricity to properly operate. If it does require electricity, then you need to make sure you have a plan for that. Second thing we'll talk about septic systems is just their regular maintenance. Included in the description that's right below this video, you will see a link to a PDF document that you can download for free of charge, absolutely no cost. That's just your basic listing of some basic maintenance tips for your septic system. And you can download this and read it and follow those instructions, but there's one thing in particular on here that I want to make sure I emphasize, and it is this. It says, have your septic system inspected every 2 years and cleaned or pumped out every 3 to 5 years. It is really, really important that you have your septic system inspected and cleaned out as is appropriate for your usage levels. So if you have if your house, your septic system should be sized appropriately for the size of your house, particularly the number of bedrooms and number of bathrooms. If you have a really full house, then you're probably going to be stressing your septic system out, so you need to have it cleaned and maintained more regularly. If you have a very few occupants for your house, okay, then you probably don't need to have it cleaned and maintained as regularly. But it's really important that you do that. You know, as I teach this course, I've taught it in a variety of different venues, and I have people tell me all the time, oh, I've had my septic system for 20 years and we've never done anything to it and we've never had a problem. Well, I don't doubt that. That's probably a possibility. But the problem is what is in there, that sludge and that scum, which are the two technical terms for what collects inside your septic tank, that sludge and that scum continue to accumulate over that period of time, and they will eventually clog your entire system. And the problem with it is, once it has clogged your lateral lines in particular, there's no repairing it. You literally have to dig it up and replace it. So that's something we don't want to happen in an SHTF type scenario. So it's really, really, really important, and I cannot stress how important it is that you have that septic system maintained properly on an annual or biannual basis. Have it inspected, have it pumped, make sure you're maintaining it properly, as well as the other basic maintenance items that are on this free download you can have just in the description here. So that's, if you have a septic system, you're really probably pretty good and set as a prepper. But there's literally hundreds of millions of people in the United States, a large portion of the population that does not have a septic or a private septic system. They have a public sewage system. So let's talk about that. That's what we're really going to spend the majority of this video talking about. If you are one of those hundreds of millions of people out there that have a public sewer system, you've got some things you need to really consider. And so let's talk about that. We first want to talk about how does that public or municipal system work. So bear with me on my artist skills. I'm not that great of an artist, but I think you will get the idea here. In a typical municipal system is majority operated by gravity. The problem is there's virtually no systems that are 100% operated by gravity. They're majority operated by gravity. So here's what happens. Let's say you live in a neighborhood up here, and this is you in this house. Your septic or your sewage line comes out. It connects to a much larger sewage line, and so does your neighbor's house. It comes down, and then that sewage line gets bigger, and it goes to the next neighborhood, and they connect, and that house connects, and all these houses connect, and eventually a really big sewage line actually comes to the wastewater treatment plant. So we have that. Then we have some houses that, because of gravity, they're actually lower in elevation than the sewage plant. So their sewage is going to come out of their house, connect to a big line, and then it's going to go to a pump station who's going to pump that sewage back to the wastewater treatment plant, the sewage treatment plant. And so in general, many of the homes on this system rely on gravity to bring their sewage to the sewage plant, but some houses are going to rely on a pump station to bring their sewage to a sewage plant. Also, some of the individual houses may have to use a pump inside the house, typically in the basement or something like that, to pump sewage to the sewage line. Again, requiring electricity here, requiring electricity here. Even some neighborhoods may have a sewage pump station that pumps their sewage to a line that eventually leads to the sewage treatment plant. So one of the first things that is likely to fail is the electricity in an SHTF type situation. And that currently that's not a problem. If it's a short-term event, all of these pump stations like this that are owned by the municipal treatment plant, they have backup. They have generators, they have diesel generators or natural gas generators, and they are able to continue to pump your sewage. However, in a long-term event, the fuel is going to run out at these stations, and these stations are no longer going to be able to pump. So one of the first people that their sewage is going to back up are the people that rely on a pump station. You most likely don't even know if you rely on a pump station or not. It's not going to be something obvious to you. So if your house relies on a pump station, you've got problems. But even these folks up here that rely on gravity are going to have a problem, and here's why. Your sewage treatment plant, when it gets done treating the sewage, okay, it's raw sewage coming in, it's treated sewage coming out, it typically dumps that sewage back into the same source of water that it got fresh water from. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a minute. When you have a freshwater treatment plant that drinks your drinking water, it typically will bring it from a river or a lake. Okay, and so let's say you've got a freshwater plant here. We'll just write fresh, and it obtains its water from the lake or from a river. Okay, it will make the fresh water. It cleans it up, and it sends it out to all the houses. So that gets the fresh water. Somewhere downstream or at a different location in the lake, the sewage plant will put the treated sewage water back into that river source or that water source. This literally happens on large rivers. I used to own a piece of property that was on the Missouri River, which is one of the largest rivers in the country. This literally happens hundreds of times up and down that Missouri River, where a city takes out the fresh water, cleans it up, uses it, then the sewage water later downstream is put back into the exact same river. For a city downriver to then pull the fresh water out and use it, and another river, another town down, take it out and use it. Literally hundreds of times the fresh water is pulled out, cleaned up, and then the sewage water is dumped back in. So here's the problem. If this sewage plant in an SHTF situation, it's going to lose power also. Again, it has generators and battery backups and things like that, but those are only going to work for a limited period of time. Also, in an SHTF situation, employees are not going to be reporting to work to this sewage plant. So this sewage plant's going to have multiple reasons why it's not going to be working properly. It's not going to have electricity, and it's not going to have employees. Okay? And almost guaranteed that sewage treatment plant operates on computers. The computers may be out also, depending on what type of event caused our disaster here. So that plant's not going to be working. So what happens to the sewage that's coming into this plant if the plant's not working properly? There's only two choices. Either, and all sewage plants will have what they call a bypass. And a bypass, B-Y-P-A-S-S, can be manual and can be automated. If something goes wrong in this system and the computers and the valves and the electricity are working, it may have an automatic bypass where it sends the sewage straight into the river. Okay? And it can do that. That's an automatic bypass. Or it may have a manual bypass where there's a valve they turn somewhere inside here that sends that sewage to the river when the system is not working properly. And that happens occasionally in our country. Sewage treatment plants go on bypass and they literally direct raw sewage back into these rivers. You'll typically have a boil order and those type of things for the people that are downstream. But in a SHTF type situation, when this plant is not working, it's going to go on bypass. It may go on bypass automatically first, or it may go on bypass manually. Or actually, one option is it doesn't go on bypass because no one's there to turn it on bypass. The computer's not working. The employee's not there to do manual bypass. So when it doesn't go on bypass, that's when all this sewage starts backing up. And that's when it gets bad. Okay? So all this sewage is backing up. This pump station already probably isn't working. So this neighborhood or this house, all the people that rely on this pump station, their sewage begins to back up into their house. Then these folks here, beginning with the persons at the lowest elevation, the sewage begins to back up into their house. But here's what happens. These folks up here at a higher elevation, they don't yet understand that this is all broken. And what do? They continue to flush their toilet and flush their toilet and flush their toilet. And all that sewage then begins to come downstream to where it can't go anymore, and then it begins to back up into the homes of everybody that's at a lower elevation. Reminds me of a story a few years ago, and some of you will remember this, but there was a Carnival cruise ship in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico that lost power. One of the big horrors of that situation was that it didn't have proper sewage function because it requires pumps to circulate the sewage properly on those big cruise ships. What was happening was they couldn't get the people in the upper decks to stop flushing their toilet. And so what would happen is the toilets were overflowing, the sewage was coming up in the toilets of every cabin in the lower levels. And they tried to get the people in the upstairs, up cabins, to stop flushing their toilet, and they wouldn't. What was really bad is those lower cabins don't have windows that work. And so the people were trapped in their cabins with sewage coming up in the toilet, and it became a nightmare. They eventually got those folks out of those cabins, but it's that same scenario that's going to happen in every municipality in our country when the SHTF hits the fans and the sewage treatment plants stop working. So what happens is the sewage starts coming up in here, okay? And the sewage starts coming up in here. In the worst case scenarios, there's vent pipes as part of your sewage system that go out through your roof. If there's enough pressure in that situation, not only will your toilet and your shower drains and your sinks be overflowing with sewage, it could potentially be coming out your vent pipes and running down your house. That is other people's sewage in your house, in your toilet, in your shower, in your sinks, and running outside your house. Absolute nightmare scenario that you could never live through. You could not stay inside that house when sewage is coming up every pipe that there is. So this is something you definitely got to plan for if you're going to be anywhere that's on a municipal sewage system, which again literally accounts for the vast majority of people in this country, the vast majority of people, particularly if you live anywhere inside a city limit. So what about these people up here? Well, they're sitting high and dry for a while, but eventually all this sewage will back up into their houses too. Eventually, even the highest person in this whole gravity-fed system will have sewage in their house too. It's going to happen, okay? So how do we prevent this? Well, there's a couple of different ways. First of all, you could not live in a municipality. You could live out in the country and have a septic system. So that's obviously one option we've talked about. The other thing is, some people say, well, can I just put in my own septic system? Well, in most places that have a municipal system will not legally allow you to put in a septic system in your yard. You have to connect to the municipal sewage system. So you really can't put your own in. But here's what you can do. What is easily available and relatively cheap is this device right here. And it's called, it goes by several different names. It can be called a check valve. It can be called a backflow preventer valve. But what it is it is basically a one-way valve. And you probably can't see it, but it shows here on the side. The flow is this direction. So your sewage can come out of your house and flow this way through this device, and it can go to the sewage system. But it has a flapper in there. I don't know if you can see that. But that flapper prevents the water from coming back this way. Okay? And it does this automatically, all day long, every day. So if you have one of these, this backflow or black water prevention valve installed, okay, in your sewage system, yes, you will also, during normal operation, you can continue to use your toilet, okay? Continue to use your sewage. But if water ever tries to come back up into it, it will prevent the water from coming back. Now at that point, if it prevents the water from coming back, the valve will be closed and you can't continue to flush. But at least the sewage, other people's sewage, will not be coming back up into your house. So highly recommend one of these devices. It kind of depends on, the cost depends on how you're going to install it. If you have a basement or someplace that your main sewage line is easily accessible, then you can literally buy one of these devices right here. It's a 4-inch. If you have a 4-inch pipe, some places may only have a 3-inch. But this can be installed in your basement fairly easily by a local plumber. And the part itself is only about $50. Okay? There's a link to it in the description. You can buy one off Amazon if you know what size pipe you need. Again, this is a 4-inch. They also come in 3-inch and 6-inch, various sizes. Most commonly, most houses are going to be 3-inch or 4-inch. It also has a way to clean it out, and so that's what this top part is. You can actually open this up, and I can't open it up right now, but open it up and clean it out. If you don't have a basement or you don't have an accessible sewage pipe in your house, then they'll for sure have one out in the yard. The problem with that is you have to dig it up a little bit. Again, your plumber, local plumber, can take care of it. There's a link to this type also. It's a little more expensive. These are more like $250 that go down buried in your yard. You'll have to have something dig up a hole, put this, install it on your sewage pipe, and then there's a way to keep it cleaned out. But again, for just a few $100s at most, you should be able to get these installed, and it will prevent sewage from backing up into your house. It is also highly unlikely that you have one of these. These are required in most commercial situations, but in the United States, for the most part, these are not required in residential situations. So most likely your residence does not have a backflow or backwater preventer valve. So highly recommend one of those. Again, the links are down there. So that will stop water from coming back up into you. Highly recommended for everybody who's planning on using their house after SHTF. The other options are several things. So we've got very basic options we can talk about here. And this is just a 5-gallon bucket with a what's called a camping toilet seat here. And again, the links are in the description if you want to buy one of these, but very easy thing to use. Most of the time you would use it with a liner of some type, so just a trash bag down in there. You can buy special liners for this, but a trash bag will do. You put a trash bag in it, set this seat on there, and you got your ready-made toilet. The problems with this is very inexpensive. The seats lids maybe $10, the buckets $4 or $5, but they are unstable. This is something that a child or an elderly person was using. You wouldn't want this to fall over in your shelter in the middle of SHTF. It just brings a whole new definition to SHTF if your toilet spills over inside your shelter. So that's one reason these are not good. These do not control the odors at all. You still have to empty the waste somehow. And so different options there, but this is certainly one option. Another option that is not too much more expensive but is somewhat handy is just a portable toilet like this. So this is a camping toilet. Again, the description there in the link in the description down below. This is about $100 for a toilet like this, and it's much bigger improvement over this. It's much more stable, provides a better place to sit and do your business. But it has both fresh water that you can put in here to help flush with, and it has a sealed compartment down below that holds the sewage in a sealed way. And there's actually a valve here. You do your business, then you flush with this by opening the valve, and then it puts the waste down inside. It even has a handy-dandy gauge to tell you when it's full. Then this can be picked up separately and taken off and disposed of. So a big improvement over this. So if you need a backup for your toilet type system, this is a great option for just about $100. Other options that you may want to consider is a composting toilet. And I don't have an example here because I don't own a composting toilet, but they're about $1,000. Again, there's a link in the description down below. But they have pros and cons. Composting toilets have a lot less odor. They condense the human waste into smaller containers, and so you don't have to empty it as often, but you do still have to empty it. And so you get less odor, you get fewer trips to empty it, but it does, most of the composting toilets require some type of electricity, so you need to make a plan for that. They don't require water, but they do require some type of electricity to make that composting happen. So those are some options there. So you got just a camping toilet, and a little more advanced camping toilet. You got the composting toilet. Some other options you may want to think about. You need to have a plan for what you're going to do with your human waste. And so let's talk about if you're out in the woods. You know, we often go camping and that type of thing. There's some general parameters that you want to use in that type of situation. If you're just going to be using the bathroom out in the woods, you want to try to be at least 200 feet away from your water source. And you certainly don't want to be up ground of your water source. When it rains, it can take your sewage and put it into your water source, and that's not good. So about 200 feet, you want to try to dig in the ground and put it underneath about 8 inches of soil. That's what's recommended there. The other thing that you may want to consider doing, especially if you're at a rural location, maybe you don't have a septic or something, you may want to try to do your own outhouse. That's how people did their business for many, many, many years before we had modern plumbing. So you can dig a hole in the ground. Typically, most of the instructions that I've read are a 3-foot by 3-foot hole, about 8 feet deep. Build something over the top of it. You do your business until it fills up, and then you cover that in, fill that hole in, and move again. Again, you would want to be at least 200 feet away from your water source, and that's going to be a big hole to dig, but that may be something that you want to do certainly to provide sanitation, because sanitation is important. So we've talked about several different things. We first talked about our septic system, if you have a home private septic system, and we talked about the maintenance instructions that's important. We also talked about how a municipal system works and why this is a bad scenario unless you are really prepared for it. And we told you how to prepare for it by first of all, finding a different location to bug out to, but if you're going to stay there, making sure you have a backflow or a backwater check valve. We also talked about some options that you may do as far as portable sanitation. So the next thing we would normally run into is talking about fresh water, but we're going to talk about fresh water at our next meeting coming up. We'll also post the video online for you folks that are watching by YouTube, but we'll talk about fresh water. It's really important you understand that fresh water after SHTF really has a lot to do with the sewage water, because a lot of people are thinking they're going to go to the lake for water, they're going to use a river, or they're going to use some other ground source of water that might not be a good choice because of what we've all talked about here. If you have literally millions of people's sewage bypassing into rivers and lakes, you better make sure that that's not going to be your source of water. If so, how do you treat it and all that? We'll talk about that again in our next Southwest Missouri meeting, but we'll also post that video on here so you can check back in a couple of weeks and find out exactly what to do for your fresh water in addition to your sewage. So thanks for joining us today at Prepared and More YouTube channel. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.